Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give us a couple of seconds to wait for people to come online and then we can get started. There we go. Hello and welcome, and thank you so much for joining us bright and early on Thursday morning. And welcome to this morning webinar, which is Transparency and Data Democratization, Why Fairer is the Future of FinTech. My name is Aisling Finn and I'm a reporter at AltFi. As you can see, I'm joined by 4 industry leaders who will be able to introduce themselves in a short while, but first just a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, we've got some amazing speakers with us today, but we only have 45 minutes to chat. So please make sure that you pop any questions for our speakers in the Q&A box below, and we will endeavour to get round to as many as we possibly can at the end of this session. So this morning's panel is part of Innovate Finance's UK FinTech Week, and we're going to be looking into all things open banking and democratization of data. We'll be discussing what the democratization of data means for both consumers and businesses, trends, and how we can see any patterns emerging within the sector. So I will come to my first speaker this morning. Good morning, Tish. How are you? And can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Aisling. So for the past 4 years, I have been the Chief Operating Officer of a consumer fintech called Clio, and we're the AI coach helping over 4 million people across the UK and US fight for their financial health. And we do this through combining data insights to really understand their spending with building a relationship with our AI coach, Clio, who we say has big sister energy that helps them really achieve their financial goals over time. Prior to that, background in consulting, helping mostly financial services companies manage their tech trends. And before that, worked in financial inclusion research, also with microfinance. So excited for the chat today.
Amazing, thank you so much. And now I will come over to Victoria Roberts from Tech Nation. Good morning, Victoria. How are you? And can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the panel today. So I'm Victoria Roberts. I'm the director of the FinTech Delivery Panel and InsurTech Board at Tech Nation. Tech Nation is a growth platform for tech leaders and across the UK, and we work to raise the capabilities but also the ambitions of UK startups right across the tech sector. The particular initiative that I run is sponsored by the Treasury, and its objectives are to really strengthen the global position of the UK as a leader in the future of financial services. So as part of that, we convene groups across the industry to work on collaborative initiatives to really meet that objective. And I think data and some of those issues is clearly a hot topic at the moment.
Amazing, thank you. And now I will come over to you, Dan. How are you this morning? And tell us a bit about yourself, please.
I'm very well this morning, thank you. Thanks for checkout.com for having us here today. Yeah, my name is Dan. I'm the policy lead, European policy lead at Plaid. So that means I speak to governments, regulators as part of our go-to-market efforts. Who are Plaid? We are a fintech company and we specialize in connecting consumers, financial institutions and fintech developers. And we aim to give consumers power over their financial data. We connect currently over 11,000 financial institutions, primarily banks, to over 3,000 applications globally. And we like to think about that we are building the infrastructure for digital financial services. Excited to be speaking at UK FinTech Week again. Many moons ago, I was at Innovate Finance. I know Victoria was as well, and we've seen this this week develop over the years. So really happy to be speaking here again. I also worked for other fintech companies in the past, as well as advised the UK government. So background mainly in policy and public affairs. But delighted to be here today.
Amazing, thank you. And last but by no means least, good morning, Greg. How are you? And can you please give us a bit of information about your background?
Good morning, thanks for having me. So my name is Greg. I'm the head of strategy at checkout.com. We're a payment company. We operate a global infrastructure and payment networks. So we help merchants, online merchants, accept payments all over the world. I joined the company 12 months ago through the acquisition of ProcessOut, which is a company I co-founded 4 years ago. And we were mainly focused on helping merchants using data, optimizing their authorization rate and their payment performance.
Amazing, thank you. And I think what would be helpful for all of us and those listening in would be to sort of establish what data democratization means for each of our speakers on the panel here today. So I'll actually come back to you first, Greg. What does data democratization mean for Checkout?
So I think for us, it means three things. The first one, it's a way to help our merchants, I would say, makes the most of what we currently offer. Because using payment data, you can strongly improve the way your customer are going to be able to pay on your website. And the KPI you're going to see is basically more transaction successful, and potentially, I would say, also an optimized cost for the transaction that you're going to accept. So that's the first thing. The second thing, it's for us an opportunity to improve the service we offer, because I would say through the ability to access more data, we can basically develop new features that are going to have an impact on conversion and a lot of things. And the last one, I think it's just a huge business opportunity to support, I would say, new business, new fintech, because, Checkout is kind of, fintech of fintech, where we onboard lots of fintechs. And so for us, this is also an amazing business opportunity.
Thank you. And Tish, I'll come to you. What does data democratization mean for Clio?
So ultimately, it's helping customers improve their financial health. Like, that's the goal, and that's what we are trying to help our customers be empowered to do at Clio. But there are a couple of challenges to that. Finance is, for most people, at best boring and at worst terrifying. And so for us, it's really not just giving them access to their data, but also it's the reality. And it's the reality for most people. And so it's both giving access to data that has that insight, that has that holistic view that they can be empowered by, but also combining it with making it meaningful, actionable, something that can really take the mental load off them over time and help them get to those goals. Most people are a bit scared to look at their bank account. And for us, democratization means people are empowered to do the best with their data and get to better goals.
Amazing, thank you. And Dan, what about Plaid?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it from our perspective, but also I work in the policy side, so I'll sort of talk a little bit about from the policy side and the trends I'm seeing. So at Plaid, we're grounded in the principle that people have a right to their data, their financial data that belongs to them. And what we're seeing around the world, I think, is governments and regulators become increasingly aware of the power of this data and are thinking about it in terms of fundamental rights. Privacy was the first thing that the governments really became aware of, and the downside risks of people's data being misused. And then we saw GDPR and other privacy legislation come about. But then there is an acceptance that there's an upside to having control over one's data through portability and being able to share it, combine it, get better services, and unlocking things you couldn't do before. And we've seen more and more of this around the world, from PSD2 and open banking here in Europe, which gave the right to share your payments data. Article 20 of GDPR, which cemented that portability right. We're seeing things like the consumer data right in Australia, which gives access to all types of data, not just finance, but utilities and other. And increasingly move towards open finance, which expands that right in Europe, data governance in Europe, and other smart data initiatives. So I think it's a movement where companies and governments and individuals are understanding the power of their own data and are empowered by using it and sharing it. And fintech companies and aggregators help provide that and help facilitate that connection, and for others to provide services on top. Reduce the complexity of sort of connecting to all these different data points. I know Clio are one of our customers as well, and they provide that added value in terms of what they do by an aggregator looking to try and reduce that complexity on the data side. I also think without democratization means control as well. So you could share your data, but if you don't have any control over it, then it's not very democratic. So I think fintech companies like Plaid also have a role in helping you better control sharing your data all the way through the life cycle, whether that's authentication, where consumers validate their ownership of the data, whether it's authorization, where it's the sort of onboarding process in a way, or anything after that, the management, breaking that connection, ending it when you've done whatever you wanted to do with the service. Then I think fintech companies have an increasing role in managing that. So we've got a product in the US like Plaid Portal, which is a dashboard concept, And I think that's something that increasingly, fintech companies can help share it, but they should also help control it as well to support, better products and services, but also gives more control and democratic control over it. I suppose a final trend is around, although governments are increasingly looking to open up the taps in their markets to allow consumers to break down their barriers, whether it's in banking or other areas like open finance. At the border, they're looking to put walls up. So the term around data sovereignty is quite big now. So you can share your data, but increasingly in the future, are we going to be able to share it across borders outside of the EU or not? So it's something we're keeping an eye on. Potentially is a sort of competing trend, maybe pushing in the other way. Governments obviously see themselves being voted in, and they need to control and protect you. So in a certain way, it's almost like democratization, but the way they're thinking about it is that you can have a better market internally, but maybe we shouldn't be able to share it across borders. So that's something else that we're seeing in the market.
Amazing, thank you. And I guess regulation is a perfect segue over to you, Victoria. TechNation is obviously government adjacent. So how does TechNation view data democratization?
Yeah, I suppose when I was thinking about it, I'd summarise, and broadly agreeing with the previous panellists, I'd summarise it as a sort of dual track of there's a great opportunity here for improving and personalising customer outcomes. But at the same time that we're all about growing a fantastic UK tech sector, just by increased mobility of this data, I think there'll be a great opportunity for fintech companies to have new ideas, new solutions, even whole new companies to grow on the back of it. So I think, as Dan says, as long as that is done responsibly and in a way that empowers the consumers, then that's got to be a fantastic opportunity.
Amazing, thank you. And
if I may, I think just to frame, I would say, the discussion, I think when we think about data, we need to be very, I would say, clear on the fact that there is two topics. There is the one which is like, the one we talk, or, Dan and Victoria talked about, which is the one which is related to personal data, which is one very important trend. But there is another trend that we should not forget, which is like all those things around basically this data, which is not personal, which is maybe like, technical, which is related to, I would say, infrastructure stuff, which has also basically a huge impact on the industry today, because you see lots of tooling and I would say more education in the different stakeholders. So today, I think we're going to focus a lot, I would say, on those personal data and the impact on the customer. But I think, people that are listening to us should also keep in mind that there is lots of opportunities on, I would say, the more non-personal data, the one I talked at the beginning. So just if some people are interested there, that they have in mind that there is lots of things you can do with those data, and that it has a huge impact today. Like, the fact that you can have more, I would say, a frictionless transaction, the fact that you can have, I would say, more embedded finance and stuff like that. Some stuff has a relation with your personal data, but some stuff has nothing to do with that. And it's helped strongly improve, I would say, the experience that everyone has on a day-to-day world.
I can see you nodding vigorously there, Tish. Would you like to add anything to what Greg has just said?
I just agree. I think there's a piece here about empowerment for a customer to understand, data that was maybe kept in a fewer number of ivory towers before, that really is now accessible to many people and can be used for good. There's also a whole load of infrastructure capability that's making payments, purchasing items, having money move, so you can facilitate how money works for everyone in a better way. That is certainly a big trend, and I would agree with Greg, very important. But I'm excited to talk about maybe that part of the personal data and empowerment as a focus for today.
Amazing. Well, with personal empowerment and a focus on consumer finances, one of the biggest barriers that is kind of mentioned a lot of the time is education. People don't really understand what open banking is, what data democratization is. So how can we overcome that, and how can we help consumers to get on the same page, I guess, as we are? Dan, I'll come to you.
I don't know if consumers need to really know what open banking or open finance is. They'll use use cases which make their lives better. Mm-hmm. So, whether it's, so we've talked about embedded finance before. So one of the customers we have in the US is Microsoft Money in Excel, Microsoft Excel, where we have a bank connection feed to a spreadsheet, the original fintech application. And it's a sort of add-on, if you will. So it's like a live feed of your finances, which means you don't have to upload it manually or whatever. So that's something where it's bringing finance to where you are at the time. So embedding it in something else. So you're not thinking, oh, this is open banking or open finance. It's like, oh, this is handy. This is really helpful. So I think having better products and services are going to make people use it more. There was a survey, I think, from in the Netherlands from the Dutch National Bank, which said consumers are reluctant to share their data beyond their bank, their payments data. But the same survey said that all these same consumers have not been offered any new products or services over the last 12 months. Well, you're not going to share your data for no reason. You're going to share it because you think I'm going to get an upside or I'm going to get some added value. So that's why I think increasing the uptake of open banking means moving towards open finance, which means unlocking more services, more products, because you can do more things with it. So I think we'll see more uptake there. And then the other side is, I suppose, it's not talking about open banking, but it's talking about control, security, ensuring that consumers feel that there's a sort of liability regime. If something goes wrong, then I know who to look to. So all these things, these guardrails, which are in place in other parts of society and economy, need to be put in place and communicated. But they're not necessarily, oh, this is open banking or this is the API. I don't think they're the type of things that people are too bothered about. But what happens when things go wrong? What are the security measures in place? Where can I control that sharing of the data? Is really useful to communicate. But the longer term picture is, what benefits can I get by sharing the data in the first place?
And Tish, Clio is obviously very Gen Z focused. So given that you have a much younger user base as say some other money management apps, would you say that you've seen your users more open to open banking, or is it just sort of, oh, this is happening, it's fine?
There is certainly something that's part generational, but I'd say that is just tech in general, using tech for anything. I think actually probably the original budgeting is probably a piece of paper or like rocks, and that's been evolving over time for whatever makes it easier still to meet you where you're at and how you interact with the world. And that's very much how Clio interacts with our customers. But I actually totally agree with Dan. Consumers don't need to know even the terminology or regulation around open banking for it to be exciting, compelling, and well explained to them what the benefits are. And consumers are thinking much more about, how do I manage my money? How can I get access to better products? How can I get access to cheaper products? And that's what we need to provide education on. That actually more personalized data means we could get you a better price on your products. Better data access mean we could actually increase the range of products you have access to. And better data access can mean it is less scary to even think about your money. And so the education is actually about, what is money? Money is outcomes, your holiday, your wedding, your hang out with your friends, and helping you get to better outcomes there is what open banking is going to let you do, because of the outcomes we can help you build together. On the other side, I think Dan is also right to talk about security, but like any innovation, there is the need to feel secure about how that innovation is going to work, while also being really clear about the benefits and how it will empower you. So enough comfort to know it's being run well, and the regulator does a good job there. But the regulator also needs to build that culture of, this is a great move, and this is a great way to empower you as a consumer, to create new businesses, and to open up what finance can mean for many people. So kind of two sides to building the right regulatory framework, making people feel secure, but making people feel excited about the opportunity there.
Amazing. And regulatory framework, right over to you, Victoria. I mean, TechNation sits across oversees so many different sectors of the industry. What would you say are some of the areas that maybe have room for improvement, or others that are excelling when it comes to data democratization and the language surrounding it?
Oh, I think when we look at the framework in the UK, obviously we've been sort of seen, I think, as sort of early adopters of open banking, and we've obviously seen some other jurisdictions sort of take some of the learnings that we've had from that in the UK as they've taken that forward in their own right. I'm really excited to see what things like the Smart Data Initiative that we're expecting from the Department for Business later in this year, where that will sort of take us. And obviously we've had this sort of sort of gently move forward on open finance from the FCA as well. So I think all of this is really sort of starting to set that environment in the right place for where we can then get the fantastic entrepreneurs that we have in this country who have the sort of greater technological capabilities than I do, that will be many of which are represented on the panel today, but they'll then be able to sort of take those opportunities and then think about what that really means. And I think it's not just going back to the question around education. I think I totally agree with Dan. It's not so much that consumers, we don't all know how our cars work and how every bit of our laptop works, but actually when some great apps pop up on them that we can really see that are relevant to our lives, whether that's as an SME or an individual, then I think that's the visibility. We need to get the visibility of these great innovations that people are building on top of that out to people to help them with their personal or business finances.
Amazing. And Greg, checkout.com is one of the biggest payment processors in the world, and it sits across so many different sectors and operates in so many different markets. Are there any differences that you've seen between how different companies maybe approach open banking and data democratization, or in different regulatory markets as well?
So I think there is different philosophy, I would say, from a geography point of view. If you think about it, the different areas we operate, they maybe think about it a bit differently, or they maybe start with different entry point. And I think that Played in the US is a very good example of, I would say, one way of entering this space and creating amazing business and value for I would say the customer and the different fintech ecosystem. I think if you think about Europe and the UK, what the regulator has done to help develop, I would say, the sector, it's very, very interesting, and you see the impact there. I think in APAC, you have other angle. But I think at the end of the day, it's really, I would say, related to what was said by the different people in the room, which is like very true, which is, what's the value you deliver to the consumer at the end of the day. And there is an amazing potential because can be either a way to provide better services in a way, more personalized, or, maybe more efficient. And it's also a way which I think is very important to, enlarge, the number of people who can have access to those financial services, because this is also something which is very unfair today. Some people are, I would say, left aside on the side of those things, and open banking is a way to have new companies developing business and offers to those people. So in a way, this is an amazing opportunity. I think then the key thing is what you do with it. And it's exactly about, first of all, trust. Be sure that the different people in the value chain, I would say, understand the responsibility that they have, because there is a huge responsibility. And it's important that you have in mind that when you have access to people's financial data, this is something very sensitive. And the second one is exactly about, I would say, the regulator creating a clear framework on what you can do and what you cannot do, and be sure that you properly educate people on that. Because I think to Tish and Victoria's point, giving access to your financial data is not something which is like, it has an impact. So the regulator has a role to play to be sure that the impact is positive for the consumer at the end of the day. I think, we had the same question a couple of years ago in the insurance sector with the access to data and the personal, insurance, which is in a way you can better score, but on the day you could leave people, on the side.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And I just wanted to remind our audience that if you've got any questions for our speakers, to pop them in the Q&A box. I can see a couple coming in, but we should hopefully be able to get around to them in just a couple of minutes. But Greg, I just wanted to quickly go back to something you said about financial inclusion and making sure that we don't leave people behind. So how does open banking help with that? And how can we use open banking to ensure that everyone is included financially?
Do you want me to start, or?
Yeah, sorry, it was just because you mentioned it. So.
Yeah. I think there is two or three, I would say, main driver for that. The first one is like you just technically give access to people to those kind of services, because the distribution cost become, I would say, lower. And so there is an interest to for some companies to build some offer that they're going to distribute. The second one is because, mixing, I would say, the innovation when it comes to data and giving access to this data will, help new companies or companies offering services where they can be able basically to understand the profile of those customers and basically offer them a service. Because again, you can, do more, I would say, personalization on those things. And the third one, I think, is basically because again, it creates, I would say, an incentive from the regulator, to push those companies, which is like, okay, if you have some data that you're not using, but someone else wants to use them because they think they can, develop a service that makes sense for some customer, then I would say you as a bank or a financial institution, you have to let those people get access to those data. And I think, the mix of those three things make that potentially you're going to see more and more people having access to those services.
Amazing, thank you. And Victoria, kind of a similar question to you. How can we use open banking to make money fairer and to ensure financial inclusion across all aspects?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing some great use cases in areas, particularly in the sort of credit worthiness, credit assessment space. There's several companies now that can help you sort of build an alternative credit score. So not just if you don't have a mortgage or you haven't been paying back on a credit card, perhaps you've been paying rent or you've been paying rent for social housing to the council for 10 years, but they've never actually managed to sort of create that into a record, which shows that you've sort of made good on your commitment, which obviously would have an impact on future agreements that you would likely to take out. So I think that's a really interesting area. And I think there's financial inclusion, and then there's also financial appropriateness, I think, without being sort of too patriarchal about it. I saw recently there's a fintech, I'm sure it's many, that are working with the sort of nascent buy now, pay later sector to actually make sure that, again, those sort of alternative credit assessments can be put through in real time into buy now, pay later, because that's a fantastic opportunity to make that available to people that might not have it available to them otherwise. But it's also a fantastic opportunity to make sure that people who might otherwise overstretch themselves with these new facilities actually to just have that check to check for their financial well-being as well. So it kind of works both ways, I think.
Thank you. And Dan, Plaid, again, works with so many different fintechs from all walks of life and produces reports and insights into different areas and different sectors within the industry itself. What are some areas that you think are really striving forward and sort of pushing the drive towards open banking and open finance forward? And which are the sort of areas that are maybe a little bit slower on the uptake?
So, I mean, it's already been touched on a little bit. Some of the companies that are doing well in open finance, supporting parts of their community that perhaps weren't as well serviced by traditional financial services. One of our customers is Canopy, which is something very similar to what Victoria was saying about building a rental passport. To use your money that you put into your rent to build that credit score to then potentially apply for a mortgage. There's similar credit assessments with the company Lightning Ventures, which assesses worthiness for grants as well, using different data points, which makes it a lot quicker, more seamless and lowering the cost to support the sector. There's lots and lots of examples in there, and I think we saw more and more with the COVID crisis as well that open banking providers really stepped up to the plate to try and support and distribute some of the relief and make the assessments there. And so I think it really came of age in terms of what it could do. I think the big upside for me is looking at where huge gains could be made, particularly if we move out from just payment accounts to a broader question on open finance. And we did a report recently with PensionBee on pensions, and this is a very closed sector. I think some of the data shows that over 60% of pension savers in the UK don't know the current balance at all, because it's in silos. You might get temporary updates now and again. It's very difficult to access that data. Another data point was 80% leave their pensions behind when they switch jobs and don't consolidate. So there's different pension pots all over the place, not really being controlled, not quite sure what the level is. you know, if you don't have control over that, it's very difficult to engender sort of a sense of, you know, the future, and I have this sort of control over what I'm doing. I can't move my money. I can't think about it. So, you know, pensions are an area where the open concept could have a really big upside in improving outcomes longer term. And I know there are things going on with the dashboard at UK government, but you know, that concept of openness again could potentially drive much better outcomes in a sector like that. So for me, there are lots of areas we can go for. We've only really just started in the open conversation, so you know, there's plenty of upside to go yet.
Amazing, thank you. And Tish, I should have come around to you earlier when we mentioned this, but obviously Clio operates in both the US and the UK. Is there a difference in attitude towards this sort of idea of money being a taboo topic? I know over here in the UK it's all very, very sort of stiff upper lip, but you don't talk about it. But is there a difference of opinion between the younger generations in the UK?
Oh, you bring up slightly there, but I think you said, is there a difference in opinion about how both customers embrace kind of open data about their finances, and maybe how the financial inclusion aspect is affected as a result? So we actually have, you know, reached some scale in America. It's now our primary market, and we have a feature with Clio where Clio will roast you on your spending only if you sign up to it and get asked for it. But part of that roast conversation is just showing how much money you've spent in the last X months. And we have loads of customers who screenshot that and share it, because actually having access to that insight just on a basic level of, wow, actually, that is where my money's gone in the past 3-6 months is huge. And so for me, you know, financial inclusion is actually about enabling new companies that can serve audiences where they're at and in different ways to give them the insight they need to take action. And we have seen that certainly in the US market, but also in the UK increasingly. I think the culture in the US is a little bit more advanced because maybe the banking system is a bit more challenging. And so apps like Mint, maybe with the very first generation of companies helping you think about your money as a third party. And so actually there's an interesting breadth of companies that are helping customers do more with their money. And that's definitely happening in Europe too. But the attitude of consumers of getting that insight and then getting excited about it and wanting to engage their money in a different way is pervasive amongst, you know, the under 30 audience that we serve who want to do more with their money. And we certainly did the trend that Victoria and Dan talked about open banking enabling, or open financial data enabling novel innovations, particularly in the credit scoring space, taking what is quite an antiquated system that can't really reflect the true situation of where a customer is at by any means, especially young customers, and making products cheaper for them. These are real tangible outcomes that is financial inclusion at the core. And that's what this kind of open innovation can do. And certainly, you know, we would hope for open banking to open finance to open everything. Why shouldn't customers have receipt level data of what they're buying, and that be really easily understandable so they can do what they want with their money?
Amazing, thank you so much. And now I think we've got just over 10 minutes left, so we'll move on to some questions from the audience. So this first question is, how can data truly be controlled by the consumer without a standardized digital identity that can move across jurisdictions? I'll come to you, Greg, because that's something we sort of mentioned.
That's not an easy one. Couple of I think the first one is the regulation is key, you know, trying to understand who owns the data, where the data is, I would say, localized and stuff like that. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is when it comes to data in open banking and in finance, I think the situation, you know, we start from a different point to, you know, the data that we have in mind on other topic where, you know, maybe you had some stuff in the news, is that today your payment data or your finance data, it's owned by your bank. So you know, I mean, you have a starting point, and you have someone which is responsible for that. And I think that in a way, what we've seen with open banking is very interesting, because at the beginning, you see the bank being very, you know, defensive, mainly because they don't really had in mind how can we, you know, make this. And then you have like all these API trends and, you know, technology company arriving and help them, I would say, be ready for that. And now you see your
Mm.
bank saying like, okay, this is all the providers who have access to your finance data. And by the way, this is the number of days where they can have access for that and stuff like that. So there is a way to, I would say, map this, because maybe the point of it is more centralized. Like, when you go online on a website, like you left some data in a lot of different space. When it's come to finance data, there is maybe less source for the data. So I think that the first thing. Having saying that, I think it should be a very strong focus from any player in the industry, because maybe we start for a more, I would say, structured points, but if we don't pay attention to it, we could end up in something very unstructured, and that in a way would be a problem. So I think it's a mix of, I would say, the framework where you start, the right regulation, and I would say a very, very strong focus, in the way we develop the industry, and in the way we educate people around what you can do with your finance data, and basically who you should give access to and why. And I think the why is very, very important, because you should not click access. You should really understand what these people are trying to do with my data.
Amazing. And I'll pose the same question to you, Victoria. So how can data truly be controlled by the consumer, or how can it be in the hands of the consumer without a sort of standardization of the sector?
I think the digital ID question is one that everybody would agree is really critical, and hopefully in the coming years, we've certainly been trying for several, there will be more of a sort of interoperable system that develops. And I know there's so many conversations going on there, not just across the public sector, but also with bodies like UK Finance, City UK, and the bank's really looking at how that can work as well. So I think let's all just keep feeding in, let's just keep the momentum, let's keep really pushing on the advantages that can bring, and let's really hope that we get there. I just had an anecdote as well, if I may. This sort of all the conversations around kind of don't forget that it's your data and you own your data. I remember going to I took the team on a day out to a data exhibition, which is how geeky it is to work with me. Couple of years ago at Somerset House, and it was all about data, and it was thinking about big data and big data in the world. And they had a button that you put in like your name, and it had like a screen. You just data capture, put in your name and bits, and then you pressed a button, and it gave you a receipt. And that was essentially trying to, I think, sort of get into that mindset of like, there is a value to that information that you've just given us. We didn't even tell you what we were going to do with it. We just put a data capture on an iPad, and everyone went, oh, what happens here? And it's funny actually, when we were talking about the education piece as well, just getting people into that mindset, that's really stayed with me. That's why I think actually this kind of point around getting people to think about what they're doing with their data will be really critical. So maybe we just need more of those, but not like the cookie buttons, because they're everywhere, but more of those sort of buttons that make you stop and pause about what you do next.
Amazing. And Dan, you kind of briefly mentioned like PSD2, and there's also GDPR concerns when it comes to our data and open finance. So what do you think about the topic?
So a standard digital identity which is accepted across borders is pretty tricky, and something that will take a while to get to. I think it's a discussion that many national governments have been having for a while. Digital identity, or identity itself, has a big spectrum as well, from right down to the point of simple onboarding through to something like a sort of passport type thing. So I think it's definitely the direction of travel that we're heading in, as everything becomes more digitized, as our lives and finances become much more digital in their makeup. We've seen that acceleration hugely increase during the pandemic, and that will put more pressure on policymakers to think about more interoperable, acceptable solutions as we live our lives online. But we're not there yet, and we shouldn't let a seek for perfection get in the way of the direction we're already heading in. There are a lot of tools out there where you can manage connections, where you can have a better view of where your data is shared. You can understand what's going on. Regulation as well around liability and what controls you do have is in place. There are rights, fundamental rights around GDPR. PSD2 sets out some other rights. Different things are going on around the world. So that's something that we're aiming for. It will be a while before potentially we land there, because there's a lot of politics involved in things like that. But in the meantime, I do think there are a lot of tools out there, combined with some of the regulatory freedoms that will allow you to control your data much better.
Amazing. And obviously a standardized digital ID is all about transparency, and Clio's users are all about transparency, even posting their own spending on social media and stuff. So what's your opinion on having a standardized digital identity?
A great innovation, but I think, as Dan says, probably some time away. I think everyone has reflected well on the advantage, but also the challenge in getting there.
Amazing, thank you. And another question from the audience now is, big tech's centralized platform business models rely on harvesting and mining consumer data. Will they change their business model for a fairer future? Does anyone want to tackle this one, or shall I hand it over to Tish? Did you want to?
I'm happy to comment. Yeah, I guess I can't comment on how big tech companies are going to treat data in future, but I will say in financial services, trust is the most critical thing to actually enabling customers to get to these better outcomes. And that trust is central to how consumer fintech should think about engage with their users, should think about the overall product structure. And actually the reason we have such a strong relationship with our users is because they trust Clio. The AI conversation interface, people say, I love you too. And that is a really different relationship to maybe some of the traditional financial relationships everyone has had, not just young people. So I think trust is really critical. And I would hope that every company can help customers get there and get the most from the innovations happening in this space.
I think, if I may, there is a slight difference between what those big, I would say, tech platforms are doing and what we're talking about today.
Certainly, yes. Also true.
The core business model of those platforms is data, and I'm not going to comment if it's positive or negative. I think they've created some service that we all enjoy using, and that we're using, that there is maybe downside. But I think what we're talking about here is very different. It's like, there is an industry, which is like the finance industry, which provide different services. People used to pay for that. And I think the idea of putting data here is more developing new services, is more, opening to more people. But it's not about, I would say, building an industry or making money out of data that you're going to collect from people and that you're going to, I think that's a bit different. I think we at Checkout, we're using that data basically to provide more features or more, I would say, services to our customer, but we don't sell, the data, or we don't basically make a business out of, I would say, using that data so other people can sell to those people. I think this is very, very different.
And so would you say that this idea even of sort of these big companies mining consumer data to then be sold on comes down to the sort of education and really reiterating and bringing home the fact that when it comes to data democratization, the consumer is at the heart of it, because at the end of the day, everyone just wants to make it fairer and more open. So would you say that this is one of those elements that probably there needs to be a little bit more discussion around and more education and be more open about it? Greg,
so
sorry.
Sure. That's a very, I would say, personal point of view. I think, there is two things. The first one is like those companies developed amazing services that we all use. But I think there is an impact to that. Like there is, when you don't pay, you're the product. That's what people tend to say. And I think that it's very important that, people understand that, and that there is a lot of education to be done, on those things. And potentially also there is some, again, a real job for, I would say, the regulator, and a very, really good, or in a very important place for the regulator on those things. Because the job of the regulator is basically to protect people when they need to be protected. And, on those new, I would say, services, maybe people sometimes don't really understand, I would say the value or the impact of what they're doing online.
Amazing. And unfortunately, it looks like we're very rapidly running out of time. So we've got one last question from me. Really quick answers to all of you. We've spoken about this, sort of touched upon it a bit today. Open finance. Do you think we'll ever get there? And if so, when? Dan, I'll come to you first.
Yes, we're going to get there. The FCA have just come back from the consultation response. We've set out some broad goals. The Commission has a target for 2022 to bring in an open finance framework. The use cases will grow by the day, and the consumer demand for it will grow. So yeah, I'm super confident we'll get there, and Plaid is going to make it happen.
Perfect. Right, Victoria, do you think open finance?
We will. We've got some fantastic learnings from open banking to draw on. We've got the right direction for open finance. We've already got things like the pensions dashboard. It would be remiss of me at this point not to mention some work the InsurTech board that we run through TechNation are doing around really sort of raising the visibility and sort of trying to inspire the insurance industry around what open finance could mean for them. So look out for that in a couple of months' time. So that's certainly a conversation we're keen to continue, and I think that insurance space is one that we'll be looking at in the coming weeks and months.
Perfect. And Tish and Greg, super quick, one-word answers, open finance. Are we going to get there?
Yes, we'll get there, and when? Not soon enough.
And Greg?
I mean, I don't know how I can add value to that answer. Maybe the only thing I can say is the good news is that, we would have learned a bit along the way with open banking, and that, you've kind of seen this trend, and I think everyone learned a lot with open banking, and I think that it will, in a way, help to faster or, do open finance better. And I think that the good news is, if you think about open banking, like this narrow, I would say first application, we're going to see very interesting things with open finance. And specifically, I think on this one, I'm pretty excited about the impact it could have to bring, access to more people to, I would say, services that are today mainly, I would say, developed and focused for, I would say, a very small part of the population.
Amazing, thank you. Well, unfortunately, it looks like we've run over a little bit, but thank you so much for chatting with me today. I imagine we could go on about this forever and ever. Be sure to check out the other panels in UK FinTech Week, and don't worry, this one has been recorded if you missed a part of it, but I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.